Welcome to the Growth Minded Accountant podcast, where our experts will share best practices on running your firm in the digital age. This podcast is brought to you by CountingWorks Pro. Let's get started.
So hello, everyone, and welcome to the Growth Minded Accountant. My name is Lee Reams. I am the CEO of CountingWorks and our sister company, TaxBuzz.com, and I am going to be your host for today's episode. We skipped a week. I actually took 2 days off for my daughter's water polo playoffs in Santa Barbara. Wonderful time. We lost by one, which is a bummer, but we're back on schedule this week. And we're going to go over, we said last time we did the Boomers podcast, we talked about all the different marketing points and how you should communicate with them, some positioning statements. Today, we're going to talk about Gen X and why is, for some reason, everyone talks about boomers and millennials, but they seem to forget about Gen X when they are one of the most sizable. They're a little smaller than boomers. There's only 65 million of them in the US, but they're cited to hold 40% of household wealth, and they're still going to inherit wealth from the boomers. So I think this generation will become more and more important for specifically tax and accounting types of services, right? Financial planning, things like that. So today we're going to discuss the importance of targeting messaging and how tapping into this demographic can drive significant growth for your firm. I see more and more, it's almost every day, whether it be an email or LinkedIn, influencers in the tax and accounting space talking about, taking yourself from a commodity or a tax preparation service and selling a $20,000 a year tax plan, right? And the question is, okay, that sounds great. I'm glad, it's like I jump up and down and all excited. But how do you actually communicate to this group? How do you identify the people that have that type of wealth or that type of needs to be able to afford that type of investment in your services? So we're going to go over a lot of that today, and we're going to talk a little bit about, what are the differences in Gen X? What do they listen to? What excites them? And then more importantly, how to position yourself from a branding point of view, an image point of view, a copy point of view to really execute on a marketing plan. So Gen X, just to define it real quick, typically people born between 1965 and 1980. I am a happy Gen Xer, and I can't wait till Rebekah starts trying to pigeonhole me because I fight every stereotype. But good luck, Rebekah. I am joined today with our Chief Visibility Officer, Rebekah Barton. Rebekah, if you could say hello.
Hey, everybody. I'm excited to do another one of these.
Yeah, and let's get into more of the background before we start with the questions. So I talked about there's approximately 65 million, 40% of the household wealth. What does that mean? That's $2 to $3 trillion in financial assets. That's a lot of money. And a lot of wealthy individuals, a lot of people during this time of life right now, this is probably the highest earning potential. A lot of them own businesses. A lot of them are professionals, doctors, lawyers with significant, real estate investors with significant tax planning and accounting related, virtual CFO type of needs. So, with them at the peak of their earning years, there's a lot of financial decisions that they're making, whether that be getting ready for retirement planning, investment strategies, everything is, selling a business, how to sell it without getting destroyed by taxes. Obviously, we have perhaps we're seeing the framework of what the Trump new tax law changes and or extensions will look like. So there seems to be some momentum here in the House and the Senate. They're competing bills, but the reality is there's going to be a lot to talk to this generation here in the future. So let's start here by defining some characteristics, Rebekah. What makes them a compelling target for whether that be a tax planning or a virtual CFO type of service?
Yeah, so there's a lot here. Gen X is interesting because they didn't grow up with the internet in the way that like millennials and Gen Z did, but they're very tech savvy. So there's a big opportunity here for most Gen Xers to get them online. You can do things like virtual portals, things like that. They're going to be very comfortable with that aspect of things. They're not so reticent to use, online referrals, things like that, as compared to boomers who are their parents in a lot of situations. So that's really good. A lot of them are very busy. They're financially stable, but they're in some of the busiest periods of their lives. They have kids who are getting a little bit older in sports, in college. They're running hither and yon to deal with family things. They have aging parents. This is a group that is willing to pay money for convenience in a way that some younger generations aren't yet or don't have the resources to yet. So it's a huge untapped market for tax and accounting professionals because Gen Xers have the funds to pay you significantly on a monthly basis for virtual CFO or personal tax planning if they're high net worth, those sorts of things. And they're willing to part with the money because they value saving time over saving money. They will pay an expert to do these things for them so they can focus on family, which is actually another characteristic of this generation. A lot of them are really focused on family decision making, family finances. In the blog article we posted about this, we talked about how Gen X was kind of the latchkey generation. A lot of them grew up in a world where mom and dad were both working for the first time, things like that. And so a lot of them became very focused on their children as a result of that. So you get a lot of them who are, college planning for their kids, trying to figure out how to provide for their children who are getting older, those sorts of things. And they also want to safeguard their own financial future. So a good tax professional can help them to kind of safeguard both aspects of that and make sure their families are taken care of, as well as their own upcoming retirement years.
Wow, Rebekah, I feel a little, you got close to home on a few of those things. You may be listening. Yeah, I just had, yesterday we met with our college counselor. The day before that, we went to a college fair. My daughter's only in 10th grade. Hopefully she's going to get recruited in a sport. And it's crazy, all the things you get, as a family, we're doing this and getting everyone bought in. Obviously, we listened to our accountant and created a 529 plan. But what we're seeing a lot lately on our forum, which is interesting, is people who did not spend all of their 529 plan, and how does that money convert to other areas? So let's talk a little bit about the financial priorities and some of the behaviors of Gen X kind of evolving over the years, and what is the implication for tax and accounting services. I think you started nailing it. So depending on where people are in their family setup with their children, the ages of their children, so some of them are, I know many Gen Xers, the kids are out of college already. I was behind. I have some people behind me. So we have different uses, and we're in kind of a different realm. We're worried about, what college to go to, affording college, traveling, those kind of things. These people that are empty nesters, it's a whole, where am I going to travel? When am I going to sell my business? When am I going to semi-retire? They have different needs. And I think the services that tie into these are different. So kind of explain that if you could.
Definitely. So there is a wide range. And we talked about this a little bit with boomers too. Some boomers are still, in their peak earning years, and some are already in retirement. You kind of get a similar thing here. Like you said, some Gen Xers are already nearing 60, and they are, in their empty nest phase already. So those people are definitely looking for a different thing than people like you who have kids still in high school, things like that. So I think also one thing you said really hit on something that we covered in the blog, their entrepreneurial side. A lot of people don't necessarily think of Gen X as the most entrepreneurial generation because millennials and Gen Z kind of get a lot of press and media attention for startups and apps and things like that. But business planning is huge here. For Gen Xers, and it feeds into every aspect of the things you were just talking about. Selling businesses, that's going to have huge financial implications for families. Preparing an exit plan, that's going to have big implications for people who are preparing to semi-retire or buy an RV and travel the country or whatever the case may be. So I think tax and accounting professionals kind of need to lean into that. There are kind of two key areas here, right? Like the family aspect of things, preparing for college, making sure your kids are taken care of, making sure your family's taken care of. And then on the flip side of that, like you mentioned, this more like exit planning, succession planning. How do you want to spend the rest of your life type of feel? And I think those are two really solid marketing plans for anyone specializing in this generation.
So let's talk a little bit more about what I said in the intro about positioning your brand to speak to this audience and these decision points. So if you're going to ask for some pretty high, whether this be like a tax planning, $5,000 a quarter, whatever you're doing, some of these higher value things where virtual CFO at $3,000 a month, what I see a lot of time is a disconnect where, well, I heard I should be doing this and now I need to go and attract these people, but they put out this just god awful website that's 10 years old and it barely loads on a mobile site, and you're just like, and you're giving a proposal for X dollars, and this is what it looks like. So explain to me some of the process that goes into just how you position your brand. How do you stand out? How do you tell a story that resonates with this audience?
So Gen X is very pragmatic, overall. They don't want people, condescending them. They want to know things how they are, and they want to hear it in plain language, and they want things to be laid out for them in a way that makes a lot of sense. So one thing you need to do here is focus on the numbers, focus on real world situations. Hey, if you do this, like we tell you you should, this is how much we can save you. This is a situation that you could find yourself in. So the storytelling needs to be very pragmatic, something that they can really relate to. And that's going to draw them in and also help them see that you're not just trying to take their money, but you actually are providing a valuable service that is they're going to see a real impact in their family life, in their business life. So I think that's key with this generation, is just being very straightforward and very pragmatic. From an actual platform standpoint, like we hit on a little bit earlier, Gen X is tech savvy. So don't be afraid to do things like email campaigns. They like a personal touch, but they are not afraid of accessing the internet, doing things online. So you can definitely take advantage of like niche newsletters, which is something we talk a lot about. You could do niche newsletters for people who are preparing for business exit planning, niche newsletters for parents of high school kids. You could even break it down to the point, like Lee, you were talking about, your daughter getting recruited potentially. You can break it down. What do you do with a 529 plan that you end up not needing all of because your child got a scholarship, your child got, recruited for something, whatever the case may be, your child joined the military instead of going to college, whatever the situation is. There are a lot of very niche circumstances that you can break down for Gen X and appeal to them in a personal way without having to get on individual client calls with everyone. And that's what's going to really resonate with this generation. Kind of high tech, but with a personal touch.
Yeah, and it's interesting you went there. So, and again, I'm not saying that let's target just the Gen X, but maybe you do have a website that targets the Gen X. Maybe at minimum you have a newsletter or a social channel that does that. And then you can create some pillar content around this. You obviously like talking about content clusters, and you gave a couple examples there from imagery and the copy and just even the color scheme and the way you tell this story. What would be your recommendations? You don't want to have a bunch of really old looking people barely getting around. You want active people that don't want to age, right? You want them to enjoy their money, and the money that you're trying to save them is going to help them have a longer, healthier life. So kind of explain a little bit of just from a visual kind of creative brief side, what we're talking about for Gen X.
For sure. Bright colors, happy people in that age bracket, right? People who are middle-aged, but having fun, out with their kids, enjoying life with teenagers. If you go to the blog post that we've referenced a few times, there are some good examples. We have like a mom in a brightly colored living room with two teenage daughters. We have a couple dancing. They're like doing the samba or something on the street together at like a festival. Bright colors, happy people who are really embracing life, living life, vacationing, enjoying the money they have. I mentioned like the RV set, people who are at beautiful national parks, hiking and enjoying themselves in nature and kind of enjoying the fruits of their labors, because Gen X has worked a long time and they've worked hard to build this wealth. And now they're kind of getting a chance to enjoy it, whether it's in retirement as an empty nester or even, they have the money to take their family on a once in a lifetime trip to Europe or something like that.
And let's talk about versioning a newsletter, for example. Do you recommend that to our clients? Obviously, I know the answer is yes. There's a lot of ways. The more personal you can make the communications and just things that we're doing with CountingWorks now, and being able to like literally iron, let's say you had 3 or 4 targets and create content specifically for those markets and have a newsletter, for example, that just has the imagery around Gen X, the messaging around Gen X, for example, the topics, the life events that are occurring for that Gen X, and make that newsletter specific to them. But why is that so important versus, let's say, just doing all fits, everything, I'm a generic, I don't have any targeted audiences, and why is that not as successful? Why is someone that niche down like that doing so well?
One thing I talk to our clients about a lot is think about your own life. What resonates to you? The same thing's going to be true for your clients. People like personalized communications. And we live in a world where I think I read an article recently that said the average person sees about 27,000 ads a day in some capacity or another. It was crazy. It was a wild number. And it's nuts how inundated we are with various advertisements, whether it's just a logo on something or an actual ad or a TV commercial or what have you. And so generic messaging gets lost in the shuffle because we are conditioned to not even pay attention to it. If someone sends you something that's targeted to something you're going through, to a situation you're experiencing in your life, with imagery that resonates with you, something that fits your lifestyle, fits the time of life that you're in, that's going to immediately stop you in your tracks more than something that just says we can save money on your taxes, because that's what everyone says. So you need to prove that you offer value, that you offer personalized service that's going to resonate with their specific needs. And that's true across generations, not just with Gen X. And it can be true in other niches as well for an industry or anything. But niching down is so important because it's going to let you really provide communications and content that resonate with the people you want to reach, not with some random Joe Schmo who wants to pay $50 to have their tax return done and then you never see them again.
So let's, first of all, I don't know if I need a community note you or not. 27,000, maybe. You're probably on Instagram. That's probably the TikTok generation. They probably see about 100,000.
It was a wild number. And yeah,
you're like, you got to be kidding me.
Crazy.
So there's two ways I want to go with this. One, before I'm going to talk about building trust. And I know that Gen X is gonna do the research on you. They're not just gonna go online and pick somebody. There's a lot of times there's a referral, or at minimum they're reading the testimonials. They're looking at your review profiles. Maybe they're reading your case studies. With referral networks, how that works. They trust the data they're reading or the person that referred them. So how do you strengthen, or what are some of the steps to create that trust-based relationship that Gen X clients so deserve?
Yes, that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought it up because that is something that's kind of unique to Gen X. They will go online, like we said, they're going to use the internet, but they still want that trust factor and that personal touch. Having a section on your website that has video testimonials could be really effective for this generation because they're not just reading, it's not static content. Having people in their age bracket, other Gen Xers who you've helped, telling their story, physically telling it in a video, and then posting those on your website can go a long way here. It's also a good idea to post on social. Gen Xers are on social. They're on Facebook in particular, but they're on LinkedIn heavily. They're on Instagram even. So if you can post these testimonials and kind of cross-use your content and post video testimonials, post even stories that people have written for you, short blurbs. Hey, so-and-so really helped me save money on my taxes, or they saved our lives when it came to paying for college for our kids. Now we can travel, we can do all of these things because of the money that they were able to help us save toward whatever the goal happened to be. So I think cross-platform testimonials and using video are two big takeaways from this little section.
I'm assuming, based on what you're saying, that this generation would also, they would actually fill out an intake form if it got them to a position or a better outcome or better advice. They would actually spend some time, working with you. So I think this generation will appreciate those that are utilizing the latest technology stacks, understanding how to bring a client onboarding through digital first, whether that be the proposal, make it easy for them to pay you, via Stripe, some secure area, kicking out an engagement form very quickly so that you're taking a lot of the stress out of the process. I think this generation 100% appreciates that. And as long as you have the proper security settings, because they're going to care about this, is your site SSL secure? Are you using two-factor authentication? Are you complying with the IRS rules? They're going to care about this stuff. So make sure you kind of look at that. The one thing I wanted to pivot back to a little bit. So we talked about the importance of a high-end looking brand. So I'm talking ad agency looking material. You want to get premium pricing, you better look good. You better be telling a story. And I'm going to go two ways here. First, I want to talk about how we go about working with clients to figure out what that story is and how to make them unique how to make them stand out in the crowd. So everyone and their mother is trying to market to the Gen X side because there's a lot of obviously income potential, but how do I stand out? And what is your process when you're meeting with clients and we start developing their narrative, and we're calling it storytelling. We're doing this kind of as the first process now when we onboard new clients, and we're actually delivering kind of ad agency custom narratives now. But kind of explain, how you go about that, how you use that discussion with the client, 15, 30 minutes to really get a lot of the personal insights, and then how we can use technology now to personalize their marketing communications.
Definitely. So this is kind of where human in the loop comes into play for us at CountingWorks. I find that I get a lot better outcomes for our clients when I do have that 15 to 30-minute in-person meeting with them. We have a real conversation. I have a list of questions I ask them. I kind of direct the conversation depending on what they tell me. I want them to tell me everything. What are your main services? What do you think of your brand as? What are the personality traits you want your brand to have? What are your designations? Because those can be very important. And then we kind of get into some fun stuff too, like what are things you enjoy outside of work? Are you part of any community organizations, clubs, things like that? And then from there, once we have all the pertinent information, why should someone choose you over everyone else who does what you do? Things like that are the questions that we ask. On paper, tax and accounting firms can look really similar until you talk to the person and you really see the personality come out. You can then use technology to feed those things into AI and start building a story based on all of the traits that this firm and this particular tax professional have. It's a great way to start telling your own story, not just on your website, but through blog posts, through things you cross-post, through social media. Lee and I talk a lot about search everywhere optimization, and that is key in this day and age. So you need to take this message, this story that you're weaving, and it needs to be your story throughout the internet, not just on your website. And that's where AI and new technology can really come into play and help you keep a cohesive narrative across every piece of marketing and every piece of content that you're putting out there.
I love it. So I'm going to go now. Obviously, I know we've been very successful, and I'm going to add personality with like personal images of yourself, even your family, your staff. Make it connect a little bit more with the audience. And this is kind of the whole idea of building, I'm going to say, long-term stability and trust with the Gen X client. They want to hire you not just for immediate value. So you're saving them money today, but they want to feel that you're going to sustain and support them over time. So I think that's really important. When it comes to now this additional messaging or like creating content, talking points per se, that will resonate with this channel, what would be your process to kind of develop? What are these talking points? What should we be discussing? What should we talk about on our homepage, for example? What should we have on our blog or our webinars? What topics should we be talking about that specifically to the Gen X side? So what would you do, or how would you start that process to kind of brainstorm? And again, using tools like Max, our AI tool, to really expedite this, to make it so it's much easier to create this type of content. But kind of explain to me where you would start with Gen X, and what kind of prompt would you write to ask Max, for example, to come up with like a content calendar for this group?
Sure. So I would probably start by first teaching it a little bit about Gen X and telling it the specific types of Gen Xers that I want to target with this particular social media campaign for the next month or something like that. Explain to Max or whatever AI agent you're using, hey, I'm a tax and accounting professional. I specialize in Generation X. This is a generation that was born between blah, 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 blah. I want to focus specifically on Gen Xers with teenage children over the course of the next month. I want to post twice a week about this topic. Can you please help me build out some social posts that I can connect back to blog posts that pertain to, 529 plans, that pertain to college recruiting, that pertain to other financial things that are going to impact Gen Xers with teenage children. Provide me with image suggestions and copy for Instagram and LinkedIn. Boom.
Yeah. So
that type.
And then a good example, NIL would be like another angle that you could cover. Yes. And you could even throw in, if you're looking for just high-end clients, I'm trying to target someone with an income level of 500,000 or more, or that owns a small business with revenue of $1 million or more. And all this context, and obviously Max and all these tools know what Gen X is. But if you're giving more context to the AI tools, they're going to be able to create much more focused messaging and suggestions and copy for the actual audience you're looking for. And the reason I'm mentioning this part is, again, I see every day I'm inundated with all of the influencers in our space about, selling these high-end packages. And there's a limited amount of people that fit these demographics. So I better start targeting my messaging really well and my brand really well if I want to resonate with them. And that's why we're trying to communicate kind of how this is done. Once you're given, let's say, that particular direction, and I might say, hey, I need 5 pillar content ideas that I can go after Gen X, and this is the market I'm going to, and I'm going to further throw in those variables like I just spoke about. It could be even they're in the Chinese American category, or people who have come over. There's all sorts of ways you can really define this. But once I've done that, it will give me these pillars, and it'll say, okay, do you want me to expand on these pillars and then and a pillar content, just so I know if you haven't been with us, is like that main piece. It's the starting piece, the central hub of, so to speak, where we write about a specific topic. And then underneath that, we'll have like 4 or 5 sub-articles that we link to. And they're all kind of just, I guess, diving deeper from the pillar content. And what I would do with AI is help me do that. So here's my 5 pillar pieces. Now let's write the pillar piece. I give it some more direction on what I want it to do. And then I could say, okay, give me the 4 sub articles that go with this. And that's the way you can easily start creating some very engaging targeted content that's really going to resonate with people. So I have one last thing here on, if I'm going to start aligning my brand with the services and expectations of Gen X, like what are the first steps that I would take? I think we've given them, but like if I'm a generalist right now, are you recommending, Rebekah, that you're not saying rebrand completely for Gen X? Would you set up a section inside your website for all the issues that they're concerned about on social as well? But like, what would be the first steps you would take?
I would kind of dip a toe, right? We don't want to alienate everyone else who might be on your client list, but if you want to start specializing in Gen X, there are ways you can do it. Set up a landing page, for example, that's going to pertain specifically to Gen X clients. And then possibly from there, you send out an email campaign to all of the Gen X clients in your system. You have their birthdays, filter it out, create a specialized list, a segment of your client base that is Gen X, start sending a newsletter just to that group. It could just be once a month to start, with issues in it that target that particular audience. Once a week, maybe start doing a social post that is a Gen X tip or something like that that's going to help those people. Start segmenting, and then over time, more and more Gen Xers are going to recognize your authority. Create 1 or 2 content clusters that specifically pertain to Gen X. And then over time, you'll start getting more and more of those clients. You're going to be able to start, raising your prices to align with the value you provide. Gen X clients who are happy are going to start talking to their friends who are also Gen X and referring you. And that's where you get the snowball effect that we talk a lot about when it comes to niching down. It can seem scary. And I talk to a lot of clients who are scared to niche down. But over time, they really see, okay, wow, this is working. This networked effect, this snowball effect, it starts to work. So my biggest advice is just dive in. You don't have to tell every other client who's a millennial or a baby boomer, I'm not going to help you, but you can definitely start building expertise in whatever generation or whatever industry it is that you want to target by just slowly rolling out pieces of content or newsletters or things like that that pertain to the pain points they're experiencing.
Yeah, just to add to that, if you're a current CountingWorks Pro client, you're using our Client Hub, what I would suggest is you create a tag. So in the hub, you're able to tag your clients based on group demographics, whatever you want. So I would create a Gen X tag, and now I can run a query, filter by my Gen X clients, and I can either hit a secure message, and I can send a secure message to that group. So all my Gen X clients could get a secure Client Hub message, or I could just send a blanket email, more like a marketing email. But this is a way that maybe you want to start getting your toes in. One of our AI agents is a tax planning kind of bot, right? So it has an intake form on top of it. You send out that intake form. It's going to collect the general information about that client. Maybe you're starting low. Hey, I'm doing a test with this. So I'm going to charge $24.95 for a Gen X tax planning tune-up. Maybe you're not the high-end market, but there's a lot of benefits that anybody could do, right? You could use that tool, set up the filter in Hub, send that intake form through the Hub, and then 10, 20 clients, they can pay for it online, right? So obviously CountingWorks allows the client to pay for it. The AI tool, the intake form, would take all their inputs and now proactively basically create a tax plan based on their characteristics. You, human in the loop, review everything, do a Zoom meeting with them, present the findings in the report, and now you've just added $2,500 fee to your Gen X client that maybe is not able to spend the $20,000 a year, but now you've done some more value. So that's just another way to get your feet in slowly but steadily, and then focus the whole thing about the messaging, the marketing side, the subject lines, to the Gen X audience. So I think we've covered this fairly well, Rebekah. I hope everyone now, from boomers to Gen X, it's obviously there's a huge amount of wealth in those two generations, an insane amount of wealth. Boomers obviously will start passing wealth down. So there's going to be new opportunities as that happens. But Gen X definitely is someone that I would be targeting. I would be messaging. Most of you are, but we wanted to give you some insight on how to do that. So to wrap up today's episode, we've explored why Gen X is not just an overlooked segment, but probably one of the most pivotal ones for you for growth. So by understanding their unique characteristics and tailoring your messaging accordingly, your practice can unlock a lot of long-term, and then again, I'm going to use this term again, trust-based relationships that translate into tangible success. So thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Growth Minded Accountant Podcast. I think we're back on track to do these weekly again. We have a few different ideas, and I think one of them we should probably explore is how to create a premium brand. I think that would be a good one that we can do perhaps next week and really start getting people through. There's one thing just to say, I want this type of client. The other thing is to actually attract them and convert them. So we're going to teach you how to do that in the next one. So until then, I am ready to sign off. Is there anything, Rebekah, you want to add to close this up, or are we good to go?
I think the only little thing I wanted to add is that Gen X is a really, really great generation to start building a long-term relationship with a family. A lot of them do have kids who are going to college. If you can prove to the parents, hey, I'm going to save you this much money, et cetera, whether their children inherit a business or their children need assistance with taxes, because lots and lots of people are needing tax help younger with content creation, with NIL, like you mentioned, Lee, lots of things like that going on in the world today that people need tax help at younger and younger ages, gig economy, all of this. So if you can really build trust with a parent who then is telling their kid, hey, X firm has helped us so much over the years, that's who you should go to. The child then is also more likely to trust you. So Gen X is in a position in life where they can recommend to their kids, because their kids are old enough to understand finances and to understand needing that kind of assistance. So it's a great generation to focus on if you want to start getting sort of multi-generational clients. I think that's the last thing we didn't kind of cover.
Well, and that's one of the strongest referral pipelines you can get, right?
Exactly.
So again, thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoy this. Add any comments or questions, and feel free to share this and like it, of course. And we'll talk to you guys in our next podcast. Thank you.